Hey everyone, welcome back to Paint the Party. Today I'm making my first diorama. I was pretty excited to do this. I've ever since I got into watching videos of these, I wanted to do my own. So the first thing I needed to do was just measure the size of these miniatures against the foam I was going to use and then cut it to size. The miniature I was using was this giant worm thing. And then a Warforged fighter that a friend of mine painted for me a little while ago when I first played D&D. And rather than just have it sat on my shelf, I thought I'd bring it back to life in a diorama. So this is me just measuring out where I was going to cut the foam, just so there wasn't any wastage, basically. This is quite an experience doing this. I learned an awful lot. And hopefully next time I do one there won't be as many mistakes. You'll see what I mean as the video goes on. Mistake number one was I just don't clearly know how to use a hobby knife. I don't know why I'm holding it so far back. This took me a long time. I cut so much out of this, it took me an awful long time. Anyway, you can see kind of cleanish cuts, and then I used that piece of foam just to measure another piece of foam that it would stick onto, just to make the base a bit thicker, because I had plans to basically dig some light water lines. So the idea of this diorama is that the Warforged fighter has been hired to go and kill this giant worm that was killing all the crops in this farmer's field. So here I am just measuring out the base, which is just plywood that's going to go underneath all of the foam. I started looking at this and trying to do it with my hobby knife, and then luckily Emily came in and was like, "What are you doing? There's a saw in the garage, go and use the saw," which is what I did. So there's a nice clean cuts on that because I used an actual tool. I think the foam's probably best cut with a hot wire bench. I don't own one of those. The glue I used was this Hold the Foam, which is specific for gluing foam. I didn't realise until I started looking into this that some glue will just melt foam. So worth knowing if you ever want to do this kind of thing. And this is the first mistake I made. For some reason I just put all the glue in the middle. And then you watch back footage of you doing something and you think it's so obvious that was the wrong thing to do, and I should have put it on the corners as well. So I ended up patching that up later on off camera. But so that was the base done. And then I wanted to kind of map out these lines where the water would go. So the idea was we're in like a farmer's field and there's rows of crop, and then in between those there's rows of water. So this was just me lining those out evenly as best as I could, basically. So once I'd done that, it was time for me to use my new rotary tool. I put this particle filter on just because foam particles in your lungs isn't great, apparently. Anyway, this is the Dremel I went for. It came with loads of little bits. This is my first time ever using anything like this, and it will show. This is me trying to add some texture to the foam, and it didn't work. And then this is me slowly figuring out how to hold it and use it to dig out these water lines. And I eventually got quite good at it in the end. They're not as neat as I would hope, but they looked okay. So those were the water lines. I know they don't look great now, but they do look semi-decent towards the end. And I decided I would try and texture the foam with a blowtorch, and hopefully also get rid of some of the bits of foam that were just still hanging around. I've been told that this is the last time I'm allowed to use the blowtorch in the house because it did catch fire. It caught fire, and obviously I was wearing the respirator mask, so I tried to blow it out and then I couldn't. Then I had to rip the mask off in a panic and then managed to blow it out, but there weren't any fires, it was all good. So once that was all ready, I'd bought this AK dry ground terrain paste, which I was fairly impressed with. You just paint it on and it creates a rough terrain. I did order a different colour, but it didn't come in time, so I had to use this sand one, which I'm planning to use for a Western diorama in a couple of weeks. So I did use this, and then I just primed it brown with, I think it's called Fur Brown, the primer that I used. So I just spread that everywhere. And then used a hairdryer because I'm impatient. Yeah, this is it. Fur Brown. And that was the base pretty much done. I was quite pleased with it actually. I was worried the Fur Brown would be really light, but it gave it a really nice soil colour. And this is the still water from the same company that makes the terrain paste. I like this product, but I don't think I used it right. It took a very, very long time to dry. I think you're supposed to keep it quite thin, and obviously these water lines are fairly deep, so it took quite a while to dry. And you'll see why that's a problem at the end of the video. So I just quickly used a blowtorch to burst any air bubbles. And then my plan was to basically use this all game terrain grass as like long stalks of crop. And then I also had this mountain tuff. My idea was this would be like the dead crops where the worm had been and killed the crops. So I kind of just wanted to stick these around randomly. I didn't want there to be too many dead bits of crop. I want it to be kind of like a nice random pattern. So I was using this Super Seal all game terrain stuff, which is not for what I used it for. So it didn't work. I ended up basically prodding holes through the foam, filling it with super glue, and then putting the longer stalks in just so they would hold, because it just wasn't possible to do it any other way. I did try for a long while though. This is one of those moments where you can see it's just not going to hold. So yeah, as I mentioned, here's me just pronging holes. I tried to keep it in line as if it was like crops done by a farmer. That's what I ended up with. I did go back quite a few times and trim them down because they just looked so high, and it didn't really look like crop, it just looked like long grass. So the next thing for me to do was just to get this miniature off of this base, and Google said to use isopropyl alcohol, and it took me quite a long time, but I did eventually get him off without any damage. And then it was just for me to decide where to glue him. So my idea was kind of that he would be at the back towards the more grown crops, and the worm would be where all the dead crops are, because that's obviously where its nest is or whatever, and that's why all the crops are dying. And then it was just time to put some paint on the worm. I primed it with the same fur brown that I'd used on the terrain paste. And then I just threw on some earthy kind of tone. And then I decided I'd give him a nice orange belly. And that was pretty much the body done of the worm, once it had dried. And then I wanted to tackle the eye, which, if anybody watches any of my videos knows, this is the hardest part for me. I just went with a nice, very like creepy glowing yellow eye. You can see my hand trembling there. But I'm pleased to say that I nailed this one. I think I did anyway. And there was our worm. I wasn't sure what to do with the rocks underneath him, because I'm pretty sure this thing was printed as one rather than like a base. So I couldn't remove the base very easily without sawing it, and that just seemed like a mistake. But yeah, this is me trying to sand down the sides to get them smoother. And there was just a terrible accident, and then my phone died, so this is kind of the end of the footage. But I will let you guys see the reveal. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I had a lot of fun making this, and I think this is probably the way forward in my hobby career. Drop a like, feel free to subscribe, helps me out a lot. Catch you in the next one.